Good evening, dear friends, my brothers and sisters. I hope you are doing well today. Listen, I'm still thinking about Saturday's warning to us. Jesus said, beware of the scribes. Be careful of the people you trust. Be careful who you deposit the treasure of trust into. Trust is a treasure, Jesus said. And we need to be careful because a lot of people talk, not a lot of people act. And Jesus said, watch what they do. Be aware of their actions. Believe your eyes and don't trust your ears. Don't trust what they tell you. Trust what you're seeing. Man, I love Jesus and I love his warnings. They're so dear and so precious to me. Be careful who you trust. Especially as it relates to religious leaders. I've known so many people that have been hurt by a religious leader. People have been hurt in marriages because of betrayal of trust. We can go around the room and of married people and say, what is the foundation? What is the thing that holds a marriage together? And of course, there's many answers to that, right? It's given to anyone's opinion of it, but some would say love, others would say commitment. My answer would be trust. My answer would be that the marriage relationship is a trusting relationship where you give your heart to your spouse and your spouse gives their treasure, the treasure of their heart to you. And we are to safeguard our trust. If you missed Saturday's message, it's an important message. It deals with trust. It deals with beware, Jesus said, of the scribes. And Jesus said, watch what people do, never mind what they say. Here is our Bible study this evening. Again, thank you for joining us. I'm glad you're here. The title of this message is Fate and Fatality. And it's in Ecclesiastes chapter 8. We're going to look at the whole chapter, verses 1 through 17. So I'm going to actually read through verses of this, and then I'm going to go back and give comments. So let's read the first verse. Ecclesiastes 8. Who is as the wise man? And who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face to shine, and the boldness of his face shall be changed. That's verse 1. Here's a little bit of commentary. I remember years ago when I first read this, I thought that wisdom made for an oily face. Did you see that? It says, a man's wisdom makes his face to shine. I'm like, so wisdom means you'll have an oily face. Oh my goodness, I had the discernment, the biblical discernment of a slug, and that's what I thought it meant. But it doesn't mean that. What Solomon is saying is that wisdom is attractive to the individuals who possess it. Oh, one of the things that Solomon tells us to run after, he says, run after understanding, run after wisdom. Do all that you can to acquire wisdom. Don't be a fool. I love the Proverbs. Let me recommend, if you are a person that would want to increase in discernment, increase in wisdom, read Proverbs. Very practical, very extremely practical. I love the book of Proverbs. So Solomon is saying, you know what? And in short, that we will ultimately end up with the face that we deserve. It's true. If you are a person given over to sin and you've lived a hard life, that will eventually show up on your face. Have you ever met people who've lived a very hard life and they're in their 30s and their face reveals like they're in their 70s? You know, because they've had a hard life, addicted to drugs, on the streets. You meet some of these people and you can't even imagine like what they've been through and the hard life they lived. But listen, a person that lives their life for the Lord, that shows up on their face too. It shows up in their speech. It shows up in their actions. So you will ultimately end up with the face that you deserve. However you're living, it will show up in your face. Listen to what Abraham Lincoln said. Every person over 40 is responsible for their own face. I like that. And this is an unrelated but sort of related comment that came from Spurgeon. Concerning the face, he said this to his students. When you preach of heaven, have a face that reflects the sweetness of God. But when you preach on hell, your normal face will do quite well. I found that to be funny. Spurgeon had a sense of humor. I'm a Charles Spurgeon fan. Listen to what the New Living Translation, how it interprets verse 1. It says, how wonderful to be wise. And here's what a wise person does. It says, how wonderful to be wise, to analyze and interpret things. Meditate on that. A wise person analyzes things and they interpret things. And it continues to say, wisdom lights up a person's face, softening its harshness. Notice what a wise person does. A wise person analyzes a situation, takes everything into account. They're not hasty. A wise person will interpret something, will interpret a situation. A fool doesn't care about interpreting anything. A fool doesn't care about analyzing anything. A fool doesn't consider consequences. A fool despises wisdom. They don't get it. A fool rushes in and they have no desire to seek understanding or to analyze and interpret a situation. Listen to what it says in Proverbs chapter 17, verse 10. A rebuke goes deeper into a man of understanding than 100 blows into a fool. Jesus says something interesting. He said, don't cast your pearls before swine. Don't share your wisdom with fools because they're not going to get it. 100 blows to the back of a fool and they still don't get it. They'll still go on into their foolishness. They don't analyze anything and they don't interpret anything. Proverbs 27:10 says, the prudent, that is the wise or the sensible man or woman, sees danger, hides himself. But the fool, they go on and they suffer for it. So let's keep reading. Now let's keep reading verses 2 through 4, and I'll come back and I'll have some commentary. We're good on verse 1?
Yeah.
Amen? Good. Let's pick up in verse 2 now. Here Solomon continues to speak. He says, I say, keep the king's commandment for the sake of your oath to God. Do not be hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand for an evil thing, for he does whatever pleases him. Speaking of the king. Okay, the king has power. Where the word of the king is, there is power. And who's going to say to him, what are you doing? Now the first half of verse 5 says, he who keeps his command will experience nothing harmful. This last verse here, half a verse here, is saying keep the law and you'll be safe. Be a lawbreaker and you'll suffer the punishment. So let's go back. Here are 4 things concerning the authority of the king. In verse 2, he says, keep the king's commandment. In verse 3, he says, do not leave his presence. In verse 4, he says, his word is powerful. And also in verse 4, it says, he's in control and he knows what he is doing. Now, obviously, we don't have a king. Solomon is referring to, well, he's a king, right? As he's writing this, he himself is a king. So it's kind of self-serving in a way. He's saying obey the law, basically. Obey the laws of the land. But I see something here more than just an earthly king. I see that this is a great list to keep as it relates to our heavenly king. Look at, I'm going to read these things again. Keep the king's commandment. Isn't that a wonderful thing to keep that concerning Jesus, our king? Do not leave his presence. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Do not leave the presence of King Jesus. His word is powerful, verse 4. He's in control and he knows what he is doing. This is a beautiful list to keep. Not regarding an earthly king, because we don't have a king, but our heavenly king. Beautiful. And listen, God's commandments are for our benefit, intended to keep us from harm. Make sure that you read the Bible. Make sure that you keep his word in your heart so that you can be safe, because God's intention as a good father is to keep us from harm. So now let's keep reading the second half of verse 5. Oh man, I love this. 5 and 6, second half of verse 5. Look, a wise man's heart discerns both time and judgment. Oh, this is gold. Because for every matter there is a time and judgment, though the misery of man increases greatly. Man, I absolutely love that. We have examples in the Bible of extremely wise people that were able to discern their time, their season. the right judgment, for like the right time, the right opportunity. Again, this is something going back to the wise person. The wise person understands and discerns a situation and analyzes it, has understanding, and says, now is not the time for this. This may cause trouble. This may bring hardship. Now is not the time. The time will come, but the time is not now. The time to act is not now. Again, the fool cares nothing about consequences. The fool cares nothing about analyzing. Listen, the world is full of fools. How many people go into a bank? They know they can't afford a car, but they're getting a loan for their car, or they're getting a loan for a house, knowing full well they can't afford it. They don't analyze anything. They don't care. The fool just lives for now. Here are two wise people. Oh man, they discerned the timing of their situation. Nehemiah had perfect timing in asking the king to allow him to rebuild the Jerusalem walls. Yea, Nehemiah, a man of understanding, a prudent man who understood the correct time to ask the king. Esther, impeccable timing of informing the king of Haman's plan to kill the Jews. Solomon said, there is a time for everything under the sun. A wise person can discern the right time, the right season, when to act and when not to act. I love how the New Living Translation puts these two verses, 5 and 6. It says, those who are wise will find a time and a way to do what is right. For there is a time and a way for everything, even when a person is in trouble. Let's keep reading verses 7 through 9. I hope, is this blessing anybody?
Oh, yeah.
I hope so. Good. So verses 7 through 9, let's read. For he does not know what will happen, so who can tell him when it will occur? Verse 8, no one has power over the spirit to retain the spirit, and no one has power in the day of death. Is that a true statement? It's not true. There is one who had power over his spirit. His name is Jesus. There is one who had power over death, and his name is Jesus. Right? And then Solomon says there is no release from that war, and wickedness will not deliver those who are given to it. Verse 9, all this I have seen and applied my heart to understand every work that is done under the sun. There is a time in which one man rules over another to his own hurt. So Solomon here is speaking about human limitations. No one has power over their destiny or over death. And it's funny how many people today are trying to speak forth their destiny, right? Nobody has. Listen, you have no control over the future. Nobody knows the future. All your speaking and declaring and all this nonsense is not going to change one iota what is in your future. Only the Lord knows the future. Only the Lord has power over death. There are human limitations, is what Solomon is saying. We are all going to die. Okay? Everyone will die. And it seems that people are uncomfortable with the subject of death. And I understand that. And here's why. Because God did not create us to die. God's plan for us in the beginning with Adam and Eve was that we weren't going to die. Death wasn't part of God's plan. That's why we are uncomfortable with the idea of death, because we weren't created to die. We were created to live forever. When God created man in the garden, go back and read it in Genesis, he created him an eternal being, and God said to Adam, of every tree of the garden you may eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you may not eat, and if you do eat of this tree, you will surely die. That tells us that God's plan was for man not to die. Man chose to sin against God, and death entered into the world through sin. But there is one who conquered death. There is one who had control over his spirit, and his name is Jesus. Jesus said in Luke chapter 23, verse 46, when he cried with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Jesus had control over his spirit. He commended his spirit into the hand of the Father, and we know that 3 days later he conquered death and conquered the grave. So he had power also over death. Let's read verse 10. We're coming in for a close, right? When I saw the wicked buried, who had come and gone from the place of holiness, and they were forgotten in the city where they had so done. this also is vanity. What does that mean? That's an interesting verse. It means this. It's speaking of a wicked religious man who dies, and yet when he dies, people seem to forget about all the wicked things that they did. And they speak good things about him. They elevate him. Solomon says it's vanity. Let me read it in the New Living Translation, and it'll make more sense. I have seen wicked people buried with honor, yet they were the very ones who frequented the temple and are now praised in the same city where they committed their crimes. This too is meaningless. A religious person, you see, they frequented the temple and they were criminals. They were doing vile things. And when that person dies, people praise him. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it happens at funerals. So let's move on to verse 11. Because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Solomon is saying when a crime, an act of violence, injustice, wickedness, when crime is not punished quickly, people feel that it is safe to do evil, to do wrong, because they see the wrongdoer didn't suffer any consequences. That motivates them also to do evil. Let's keep reading verses 12 through 14. Though a sinner does evil 100 times and his days are prolonged, yet I surely know that it will be well with those who fear God, who fear before him. Do you get that? Man, I love that verse. But it will not be well with the wicked, nor will he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he does not fear before God. There's this vanity upon the earth that occurs on the earth, verse 14. And he says that there are just men to whom it happens according to the work of the wicked. Again, there are wicked men that it so happens according to the work of the righteous. And this also is vanity. So here's the conflict in Solomon's mind and in his heart. Here's Solomon's struggle. And listen, I struggle with it too, and maybe you do as well. He's saying this: why do bad things happen to good people, and why do good things happen to bad people? It doesn't make sense. But notice where it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense on the earth. On the earth, it doesn't make sense. Why? Because we're in a fallen world. Solomon realizes what you and I must realize is that things don't make sense here on earth. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason, but it's here on earth where justice is not given to the righteous, where the wicked person prospers and the poor person goes on begging. And this is a conflict. Like, why do these things happen? You know, it wasn't too long ago, I came across this YouTube thing. This little girl who had been kidnapped when she was 11 years old. This is the kind of wickedness, right, that happens in this world. The guy that did it was a repeat offender that fell through the cracks, so nothing ever happened to him. And for 18 years, he kept this little girl captive. His parole officers went to his house 60 times. They never checked the backyard where the little girl was chained up. Okay? So I see things like that, and they bother me. They're bothersome. I'm like, how can wicked people go on and not go punished? And that's just one example. There's hundreds of examples, it seems, daily of people that are committing these hideous acts, and they live on. But it's all on this earth. Solomon is saying and sharing the frustration that perhaps many of us share, that things sometimes just simply don't make sense. People in this world will get burned, and we have reason to be upset. Innocent people suffer, and the wicked seem to go on living their life with no suffering and no consequences. Now, for the believer, do I have to tell you, this isn't our home? Peter said that we're looking to a new heaven and a new earth that are filled, come on, somebody get happy with me, that are filled with God's righteousness. That's 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 13. Amen. All right? Amen. So this isn't our home. Things here don't make sense because Jesus is not ruling. This is not the new heaven and the new earth yet. Let's finish up right here, verses 15 through 17, and then we're done. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for hanging on with me. So I commended enjoyment, because a man has nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry. Solomon is not in a good place. Ecclesiastes is not a place where you want to get doctrine from. This is just one man expressing, the wisest man who, has ever lived, supposedly. I think it's Jesus, but Solomon was a wise man, as you all know, and he's just here recording some of his observations. He's a backslidden Christian, say. But this is what he says, right? At the end of the day, let's just eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, right? For this will remain with him in his labor all the days of his life, which God has ordained for him under the sun. Solomon says, verse 16, when I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, even though one sees no sleep day or night, then I saw all the work of God, that a man could not find out the work that is done under the sun. For though a man labors to discover it, he will not find it. Moreover, though a wise man attempts to know it, he will not be able to find it. What is Solomon saying? This is his entire perspective. This is the conclusion of the matter, if you will. Solomon is saying we will never be able to make sense of the things that happen in this world under the sun. And here's a final word of application for me. If your perspective is simply on this earth, you will struggle through your whole life. If what you give yourself over to is to try to make sense of the things that happen in this world, even to you personally, it will not make sense. The answers to life's difficult questions are not found under the sun, they're found in the sun. The Son, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. The answers to life's most difficult questions are not found under the sun, not in this world, but they're found in the Son. The Son of God, Jesus Christ. So I pray that you find your comfort, your answer, your refuge, your strength, your wisdom, your agape love in the Son. Stop looking for it under the sun, and you'll find it in the sun. That's my encouragement to you this week.